Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we're unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the district's website an audio video recording transcript or other record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Pursuant to Mass General Law 7C 30A Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body or may transmit the meeting through any medium. At the beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform the attendees of any such recordings. I believe this is being recorded by CTSP for replay, so it is being recorded. The list of agenda items are those reasonably anticipated by the chair which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may be brought up and discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. I'm going to start the meeting with a roll call so we all know who's here since there's over 70 participants and I can't see it. Rich Tahoney?
Present.
Bill Fields? Ann Hutchinson?
Here.
Andy Potter?
Here.
Diane Singer?
Here. Here.
He's here. Thank you. John Stevens?
I am here.
Excellent. Jason St. Peter?
Here.
Paul Thomas?
Here.
Okay, and we know Dan Rustin will not be here, so Bill Fields is the only one that at this point is not here. So let's start with the superintendent's update on COVID-19 reopening plans.
Okay, so there are really four things that I want to share, and one of them I'm going to have Kate also help me share. So the first one is it's public knowledge that we're in negotiations with our two groups, the teachers and the paras. Those are ongoing and I think productive. So those continue. Big news since we last met is, and I sort of foreshadowed this, the governor and the Department of Public Health and DESE released a metric to help inform decision-making around schools. That's publicly available. Some of you saw it in local media. There are actually two metrics, one that's sort of a general one about communities and one that's specific to schools. We're expecting a little more guidance on how to aggregate sending towns to regional schools. So the simplest way would be for us just to look at our three member towns, Great Barrington, Stockbridge, and West Stockbridge. A more complex analysis might include towns where we get tuition and choice students from, and that's something that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later tonight. But that's a change. The other thing is we continue to get significant parent feedback about where we are in the process. And though I'm not tallying every single response, the response from parents is largely in favor of at least moving to a hybrid model. So we're getting that regular feedback from parents. The other thing I'd like to do is at the end of the last meeting, we talked a little bit about what are we doing for students with special needs and or high needs students. So I'd like to take a few minutes to have Kate Birdsall, Director of Student Services, talk about a merging plan there. I think it's around a 5 or 6 minute overview of that that she'll do verbally. And then after that, I think, depending on what you want to do, Steve, I could respond to some questions about that proposal or possibilities, or the committee can go in whatever direction the committee wants to go.
Okay.
Okay. So Bill has joined us, so now I think everybody's on the call.
Okay.
Good. So Kate, do you want to give a brief overview of our emerging thinking and some possibilities we're discussing?
Absolutely, thanks. Good evening, everyone. We have a potential proposal specific to high-need students with significant and complex needs to share with you tonight. The proposal is just that. It is still in draft form. Nothing has been finalized yet. The details need to be agreed to and negotiated. I will share some of the rationale behind the proposal, our guiding principles and values, information that will help to clarify pieces of the proposal, and a basic overview. We know that our students with the most significant and complex disabilities benefit the most from being in school in person in order to access their education by way of receiving the services in their IEPs. Russell Johnston, Senior Associate Commissioner at DESE, has been consistent in his message that districts should consider ways to get the high-need students with the most significant and complex disabilities into schools for as much in-person learning as possible, whether the district is in an all-remote model or a hybrid model. Given this clear message, we have created a proposal that addresses both of these models. We created guiding principles and values for the special education department this spring once we entered the remote learning phase in April. And over the summer, the special population subgroup of the reopening committee made some shifts to these guiding principles and values. Currently, these are the guiding principles and values for special education in Berkshire Hills. Foster and ensure equity, access, inclusivity, quality, and consistency of learning experiences. Build and cultivate strong, meaningful relationships and connectedness. Support the safety, social, emotional, and physical well-being of students, faculty, and staff in our community. The proposal talks about specific subsets of students as well as 3 phases. I'll take a moment to define the phases and then the subsets of students as I see them. I refer to 3 phases in the proposal and assume that there's a time and place to move from one phase to another and back again, as the metrics and decision-making might indicate. Phase 1 is when the district is in the distance learning model. Phase 2 is when the district is in the hybrid learning model. And phase 3 is when the district is in the in-person learning model. In terms of students, there are 4 categories in the first subset in phases 1 and 2. These are students Peter refers to in his reopening plan as the students in cohort A, and these are the subsets of students that Russell Johnston from DESE suggests that districts prioritize for in-person learning. In phase 1, the first category are the high-need students who have significant and complex disabilities, students who are in substantially separate classrooms and who have a high level of need in their IEPs, students who are unable to participate in remote learning based on their disability-related needs, and students who primarily communicate using alternative and augmentative devices. The second category are the high-needs English language learners. These students are duly identified as English language learners and students with disabilities, as well as newcomers and students with limited or interrupted formal education. The third category are preschool students with and without disabilities. And the fourth category are the high-needs homeless and foster care students who also happen to have disabilities. In phase 2, the aforementioned identified students remain static, while additionally identified students are added to 3 of the 4 categories. Category 1, students with significant complex needs, expands to include students with disabilities who have a moderate level of need indicated in their IEPs, who are in partial inclusion programs, and or those who qualify for extended school year services in their IEPs. Category 2, English language learners, expands to include students with emerging English language acquisition skills based on routinely used assessment tools. And finally, Category 4 expands to include homeless and foster care students with moderate needs. I will make the overview of the proposal rather simple. In phase 1, the distance learning model, we would suggest that the high-need students with significant and complex disabilities, the highest needs English language learners, the pre-K students with and without disabilities, as well as the highest needs homeless and foster care students, receive as much in-person learning as possible, while most of their peers and classmates are receiving learning virtually. For this proposal, we suggest that the in-person learning begins on September 14th. It is just a suggestion. Again, there are many details to be worked out, negotiated, and agreed to. In phase 2, the hybrid model, we would suggest that the aforementioned students, as well as the expanded list, including students with disabilities who have a moderate level of need, who are in partial inclusion programs and or who qualify for extended school year services, the English language learners with emerging language skills, and the homeless and foster care students with moderate needs would be in school for 4 days per week during the hybrid model rather than 2 days per week. They would join cohort A in Peter's reopening plan, and therefore this in-person learning would begin when we enter a hybrid model. Again, the details need to be worked out and negotiated. Given what we know about our students, the guidance from DESE, what other districts in Massachusetts are working toward, we feel that this proposal takes all of this into consideration and is a reasonable place to begin. Should the district move between phases throughout the year, these students would receive in-person instruction as initially discussed. We anticipate that we will revise, update, and change this proposal as we move forward in the next few days and weeks, and negotiations will obviously be a critical piece for this proposal to be successful.
Sorry. Thank you, Kate. But I appreciate that overview, and I think it's thoughtful and works well to meet the needs of our highest need kids. Steve, how would you like to proceed from there? Do you want to take questions from the school committee first?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's first, just the school committee, ask questions about what Kate just discussed before we go into public comment, because I'm sure there's some questions here.
I had a question.
Yeah, Jason, go right ahead.
Okay, I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to have you respond publicly. You said that preschool students who do not have any disability or needs would be grouped in the first category. Could you explain the reasoning behind that?
Absolutely. The reasoning behind that is that all of the guidance that Russell Johnson has given us on bringing students back in to in-person learning is that we need to do it in the most inclusive way possible. And the whole premise of our pre-K program is that our students with disabilities have peer partners and role models. And so we desperately need to have them with our kids if we were to return them.
Great, thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Any other school committee member?
Just a procedural issue. I think the plan is great, and it's clearly a lot of thought. If I have any specific questions on details, I don't have them in the front of my head now, but I can talk to you, Kate, offline sometime. But so this will be coming back to us, we think, at some future meeting, potentially next week. Not to put pressure on you, but just the rate of which this committee is being asked to make decisions over the next few weeks is challenging.
Yeah, it's very challenging. So I think we'll get this to you as a written proposal in the context of all the other work we're doing, and I think we'd ask for your recommendation or vote to implement that.
You think that'll be by next Thursday, Peter?
From a writing perspective, yes. From a negotiating perspective, that remains to be seen, hopefully.
That's fair.
Okay. That's fair. Yeah, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other school committee members have questions? So not hearing any from the school committee, the next thing on the agenda is public discussion and comments.
Steve, was that our public comment on Peter's entire report, or just on the?
No, absolutely not. We will, afterwards, the school committee will, after the public comment, school committee will have their chance to discuss. So if anyone has any comments or questions, and preferably not grilling of the superintendent again, it was very polite and well done last time. But we'd love to hear opinions of parents. limit to 3 minutes. If you want to speak, just raise your hand on Zoom. If you're on a phone, you hit *6 to raise your hand and *9 to unmute yourself. So I will start with Kate Burke.
Hi, how are you guys doing? I just wanted to follow up and ask kind of Peter a follow-up question about homeschooling options that would allow us to keep our kids in the district. I had sent an email about it. I know that you guys are planning so much, but I definitely took my son to the pediatrician yesterday, and she mentioned that a ton of parents have been talking to her about that. So I just am wondering if there is a way for us to do that without hurting the school district in further future years, and if there's any thought in that and all of the thought that you guys are thinking.
Yeah, no, and Steve, I'm happy to respond to it. Kate, it's a really good question. So what's hard about this is the language we use around this has to be really precise. But what people hear when they hear homeschooling or something else is often different, right? So let me try to run through a couple different scenarios with very precise language, or as precise as I can create on the spot. If somebody chooses to homeschool, they're formally removing them from the district. And if you live in one of the 3-member towns, you're just doing that, right? And you're writing the principal and me a plan for how you're going to homeschool your child, and we approve that. And this gets a little confusing, if you're a choiced-in student and you choose to homeschool your child, then effectively you're withdrawing them from the district. And if at some future point you want to come back, you have to apply again through the choice process, and your readmission is not guaranteed, right? You just go back in the lottery. So there are two sort of different things around homeschooling. The other issue around homeschooling is the financial one. So if a student is homeschooled, I think this is what you were getting at, then they don't count in the district's enrollment, which connects to state funding. So if somebody wants to homeschool their kid, they can choose to do that. But the consequence for the district is the district gets a little bit less funding. Short of homeschooling, but sort of similar, but it doesn't fall into that, would be for a parent to opt for fully remote learning. So their learning would be provided entirely online for the year. They, within that, could also do some supplemental work. The advantage of that, whether they're an in-district student or a choice student, is they stay within the district. And if they're in either case, the district doesn't lose the funding connected to the child. And in the choice student case, if the choice student then wants to come back the next year, they're still a student, so they come back. Okay, so hopefully that gets to what you're asking about, and then sort of to the continuation of it is, if we're in a hybrid model, the student could be with us part-time, face-to-face, and then part-time remote, and then if we get to a point where we can all be back face-to-face, then they'd just be with us face-to-face.
Kate, does that answer your question?
It's not the answer I want, but yeah, it answers my question.
Okay.
And Kate, it may make sense for, like, it's super complicated. I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can talk about it another time. I just was curious because you had said you would look into it, and I obviously know you're looking into 8 billion things right now, but I just wanted to see if it continued to be part of that kind of equation.
Right.
Just because I am worried about the finances from state funding coming in the future, as a lot of parents are having that conversation, like in district parents, I think, are having that conversation.
Yeah, if a large number of parents chose to homeschool, it would have a dramatic impact on our
Right.
right? But at the same time, people need to do what's right for their own children. So we support that too.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Karen Doyle Grossman.
Oh, thank you. So Kate, thank you so much for the plan that you put together. I wanted to ask about the timeline. It sounds like you said there's the timeline of next week and possibly a vote, but then also negotiations, and particularly for the Category 1 kids, if there's a possibility that that this idea of in-person learning does not go through, and that there's a possibility that then even the Category 1 kids would have be faced with distance learning. As we've talked about, then it's figuring out what in the world do we do individually as households. So I just want to understand the timeline of when the final decision will be made, and I guess a little bit of the likelihood in that your proposal would be rejected through negotiations.
Kate, if it's okay with you, I'll speak to that. Is that okay? Karen, I'm sorry. I know everybody wants really concrete answers in this time, and I know the uncertainty is driving us all crazy. I can't speak to the likelihood, and I don't think it's a matter of if it gets approved. I think it's more a matter of when it gets approved. So it's clear that we need to meet the needs of our highest needs students, and I think what we need to do that is agree to conditions that folks feel are safe to do that, right? So I can't say it's going to be a week, it's going to be 2 weeks, it's going to be 3 weeks, but it's one of our highest priorities in negotiations. So I hope that we get to a good place soon. And we've now got these meetings every Thursday for forever. So stay tuned every Thursday. We'll give you an update.
Thank you.
Okay.
Amy Malloy.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, everybody.
Say your name and address, please. I haven't been doing that, and I should, and I'll miss.
Yeah, Amy Malloy, 170 Christian Hill Road in Great Barrington. And I just want to thank you all for this tremendous amount of work that I know that this is. And I'm kind of piggybacking on Kate Burke's question about sort of homeschooling. Our kids are little, first and third grades, and there are parents who are starting to talk about potting together, trying to pool some resources to hire a teacher who can, that would allow us to stay enrolled in Muddy Brook and follow the curriculum and, meet the goals so that both we can stay part of the school and progress. But rather than having them be on a screen all day, they would be working with some sort of adult who's going to help them learn without the screening. And I'm just wondering how much flexibility you guys are going to allow for that. So that might mean that they don't attend every Zoom meeting, or they're not turning in all the schoolwork when it's supposed to be turned in. And but instead, is there a way to show that we're committed to the work, that we're doing the work, that we're making progress, that doesn't necessarily tie us to this computer or whatever you guys have in mind, especially for the little kids who, my first grader will learn nothing if she has to just be on on the computer all day. So will you allow flexibility for that without us having to withdraw and qualify as some sort of homeschool?
It would be my inclination to do that. I might need to formally ask the school committee for permission to do that. I imagine they would support it because it meets the needs of kids and it's good for the district, right? Both things. So I think we can figure out a way to make that work. I want to do a little research, but I'm optimistic about that.
Okay, good. Because I think a lot of at least the parents that we're talking to, and there's probably maybe 12 of us at this point, who would love to stay enrolled, but would appreciate that flexibility. So thank you.
Steve, is that fair? Is that a fair statement?
I think it's a fair statement. It is a school committee decision, but school committee has been very flexible so far. So I think I'm optimistic on that one. Anyone else who would like to speak from the non-school committee?
I would, but I'm not sure how to raise my hand.
That's okay. Just say your name and address and go ahead.
Ariel Pink, 25 Hart Street, Housatonic. I was wondering what the district is doing to help parents connect to each other, to help meet each other's needs. I feel like there's a lot of issues here that are being raised by parents, and I think there are things that we could provide for each other, but we just don't have access to that information. So it would be great if somehow we could use the school as an intermediary to connect to each other, to help meet each other's needs, because there's a lot of people who can't hire a teacher, but may be able to provide support to other kids, and people who need support can get support from other parents. So my question is, like, are we working on something to connect people together to have their needs met?
We're at this moment, we're not explicitly working on that, though we have a long history and tradition of parents supporting parents that I mean, in every building, right? That started in the Muddy Brook largely with the PTA, and then at Monument Valley with the mentoring and parent mentoring, and then continues in the high school in other ways that are often more specific to activities. If you have some ideas about how the district can help facilitate it, and we can sort of get it going, and then it can be parent driven, I'd be really happy to do that. It's a time now when we're so busy with so many things. I don't want to take on full responsibility for another endeavor, but I'm happy to connect you or some parents together and point you in a good direction.
Yeah, I would love that. I can send you an email to start the chain.
Yep, great.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
Anyone else? Okay, so it's time for the school committee. Hold on, I do have a chat here. I'm getting better at this. There is someone who said there's a parent chat during Project Connection, and that may continue. So there's one thing that you can put on your long list, Peter.
Okay, well, and maybe what we do in Project Connection sort of being a program that creates models for us, maybe we build on the strengths of that parent chat and expand it to the district or I mean, it's hard to sort of think, does it make more sense to do it building by building, or in this case, community by community, but maybe both ways. We'll do some work on that.
Okay. So now for the school committee, people have some thoughts. I have a number of thoughts. I don't want to go necessarily first, but I would be glad to, unless the school can, if there's someone else who'd like to speak, go right ahead.
I guess, I don't know if I have a statement, but just an issue I think we got to kind of flesh out a little more clearly this tonight is how are we interpreting and what is our relationship to the guidelines that went out 2 days ago? You know, and we had 3 meetings discussing the reopening. 2 of them ended in votes. And at every stage along the line, you know, we were kind of looking forward to these guidelines. And I know the negotiations component is a big part of it, but we have a, well, I guess I'll leave it there. I don't know, maybe Peter or other people can give their thoughts, but are we following them or are we not?
Yeah, if you're asking me, Rich, I think it's time that we piggyback onto the guidelines as soon as we can. We've said 3 weeks remote, but as soon as those 3 weeks are up, or if it's less, it's less, that we follow the state guidelines. I realize there's negotiations involved. We may choose to do hybrid and have to give, as you talked to me earlier, get some sort of a waiver instead of completely in person. But I think the sooner we go, the better, because we all know that as it gets into wintertime, there are some predictions that the numbers could get worse and we could be back to remote. So the more in-person we can do, the better it is. So that's how I feel about that. And well, I have the floor. The other thing I'd love to see the district do, and I don't know if we have the personnel, I'm not so worried about the money because kids are too important to worry about the money, is I would love to see us get the parents together. I don't want to see parents have to hire teachers to teach their kids and stay in our district. I think that's our responsibility. I'm not an educator and I don't have any great method, but I really feel strongly that we need to meet the needs of every child in our community the best we can. And to have certain parents who are able to and certain parents who can't seems really unfair to me. I know we're working hard and it's not anything we're doing wrong. I think that's the direction we need to go in the next 2 weeks. And I also, personally, just to put some pressure on, I think Kate's idea tonight was, and the administration's idea was really a step in the right direction, and I would love to vote on it next Thursday. So if it takes a lot of negotiations, it takes a lot of negotiations, but I think we owe it to the parents to know what our plans are. But that's just my opinion. And maybe I'm just being old and crotchety because it's warm.
My thing is, I would love to follow the guidelines, but the guidelines change every 2 days. And that's where I think everybody's running into difficulty is when everything changes constantly. It's really tough to make a plan.
Well, they're gonna update these guidelines every Wednesday going forward. And the recommendation in the guidelines is that everybody deals on a 3-week rolling average. So there is some stability in it.
Peter, someone asked if you could review the guidelines. I don't want you to take an hour reviewing them, but if you want to just give a brief synopsis of what the guidelines are, so people who haven't read them.
Yeah, they were in the local media, and I'll get them on our website. Maybe not tomorrow, but Monday. The commissioner of the Department of Public Health and the governor have come up with a set of guidelines, and then there's a color-coded system. So there are 351 towns and cities in Massachusetts, and every one of those is on a map, and I think there are 4 colors, so just clear or colorless, yellow, or maybe green, yellow, and red. And right now in Berkshire County, I think only Pittsfield is green and everybody else is colorless.
Yeah, it's white.
Yeah, white or yeah, what I mean. It's, and that's where things are. And then there's guidance that you can do if you're this color, if you're clear or white, then you could do face to face or remote in particular circumstances, and then face to face or hybrid in particular circumstances, and then as you go up, it's hybrid or face to face again, or hybrid, and as you go farther up, then it's hybrid or remote, and then if you get to the highest level, it's certainly remote. So those are out there. They're on DESE's website, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It was all over the news, but I'll get it up on our website so people can look at that. But that's the thing. When it hit the news, the most of the letters I got were related to that. And thank you, Andy. It's hard for me to talk and post things and do us all at the same time, but he just shared the guidance in the chat. So if you're in the chat, you can click on that and see that.
Okay, school committee, other members who have anything to say?
Well, I'd just like to say that things are in flux. I certainly would love to see kids back. Being a former teacher, that's the best way to do it. But things are changing so quickly between last week and this week. We've already had changes in the state in regards to Boston. We've had changes in Pittsfield. So I think we have to be prudent in regards to, I know there's a lot of parents that want the face-to-face and want kids back in school. But I really think we should be very careful that we don't rush this. And I've always felt that we should be phasing in the hybrid. And that to suddenly change and go to either all in person or even a hybrid at this time, I believe is premature and would put us in a position where later on down the line, in October, flu season, we're going to get an idea of how the students who are coming into Berkshire County have affected the rates and the visitors. I drove to Pittsfield yesterday, and I was behind a car from West Virginia. Coming back, I was behind a car from Rhode Island. A car passed me from Georgia. Now, I won't cast aspersions on any of those three fine states, but I wonder if they had filled out forms and had quarantined for 14 days. So I really think, and I've gotten messages here from parents that everybody's gotten, and I understand completely what the issues are in regards to your need to have kids back in school. And I agree with you, but I think we would be premature if we go back on what we voted last week in regards to this issue. I think we need to be very careful we don't rush anything. And we have some health people on our committee. I think they'll agree that this is so fluid, this virus. And as Dr. Fauci says, it's the virus that's going to tell us what to do.
Rich.
Yeah?
I thought you wanted to speak. I saw you unmute yourself.
Oh, I do. Well, I didn't, but I do have one thing to add. Going back to something you had said earlier about approvals or anything is there's some tenor going on a little bit at this meeting beforehand that somehow like our compliance with these guidelines is 100% optional, or if they're a mandate. I don't know what the answer to that is. To be clear to everyone, if we were to follow these today, we're not talking about a hybrid model. We're talking about remote learning or in-person learning, 100%. We're in the safest category. And I agree with what Bill said and what other people said is everything's got to be on the table. Everything is fluid. I'm comfortable with that. But if we were to go with the hybrid model, that is a deviation from the guidelines. Reading directly from the state's mandate, it is our expectation that district learning models will follow the color-coded metrics unless there are extenuating circumstances identified after consultation with local boards of health. So my only suggestion is if we're going to proceed down this road of fluidity and keep things open and not follow the guidelines, then I think Peter or somebody else has to engage with the three local boards of health to see if we can identify extenuating circumstances that allow us to do that.
I think it would behoove us to come up with a plan that occurs after the first 3 weeks. And at some point, we have to follow the guidelines. And it would give parents some stability to know what our plans are. And that would be to follow this. To my idea is that after the 3 weeks of remote learning, we're going to follow the guidelines. And I realize it's subject to negotiation, but it's also subject to state regulation. So to me, that would give some stability to where we're going. And Bill, there is some fluidity, but there's going to be fluidity until this pandemic goes away because it all depends on the numbers. And the more days we can get students with one-on-one learning, the better it is. So in my mind.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Diane. There are a couple of things. I've done some reading through the American Academy of Pediatrics and what they are recommending, and looking at the numbers in our county, I'm worried that kids are suffering more from not being in school than from exposure to a virus in a county where the numbers are very low presently and have been for quite a few weeks. And I would be very comfortable moving toward a hybrid and then a full attendance model, but one in which we control very clearly the way things run, much as we do at my office. I was very scared to go back to work at a time when the virus was still high in the county. But I think that I would be most comfortable with trying to move towards something in which we can keep kids safe, but also very clearly move toward having them in school.
Thank you, Diane. Anyone else? Someone has raised their hand, but we're done with the discussion. It's over with. I don't have anybody with their hand raised. They said in the chat that they did, but if somebody wants to unmute themselves and speak very quickly, that's fine. But we have public comment earlier.
Steve? I have a quick question. Is faculty going back in person on August 26th?
Peter, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, we don't know the answer to that yet. The August 26th is the first day of professional development. That's one of the things we're talking about. We'll give you an update on that shortly.
Thank you.
So, Ann, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, so, I mean, I agree with Diane that we want to be moving quickly to get schools open now when our numbers are really low and establish that base, because kids may not be in for very long, or they could be in for a long time, but it seems like now's the time to, now that the metrics are out from the state and we're clearly in a very low numbers, and yes, we do need to make sure parents are aware that if they've been out of the state or traveled somewhere else, they need to home quarantine for 2 weeks. I mean, there need to be very clear guidelines for parents and teachers, anybody who's in the school building, but that's how we keep our children and our staff safe, and try to use the time now when it's, right now, if we're not green, we're clear. Right now we're clear. And that we use this time to get things done in person.
I have one thing to add also.
Yes.
I don't think that as far as staff goes, that everybody should be, I would never require staff to come back if they have any compelling reason to not want to come back. The same as I would never want a child who didn't, or parents who didn't feel comfortable sending their children to want to come back. So I think maybe as part of our guidelines, we would definitely take into account staff that couldn't or wouldn't feel comfortable coming back for medical reasons, or inability to wear a mask, or inability to follow guidelines that are set.
So,
Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So I just want to say a few things. I know we had our vote last week, but I feel that this is probably, well, in my 5 years on the committee, this is the most important decision we have to make going forward. I also wanted to let you know that in the last week, I've gotten more correspondence from parents than I have combined in the rest of my 5 years on the committee. Every single one of them basically saying that they are against going to a full remote model to start. So a couple things, topics that people brought up that I fully agree with is that the risks of remote learning cannot be dismissed, equally as well as the risks of going back to school. And to follow up on Diane, I also have been looking at the American Academy of Pediatrics position on this, and they wrote that remote learning will severely impact and increase learning loss. It will increase social isolation. It will increase child and adolescent physical and sexual abuse, especially through decrease in reporting. Will increase substance abuse, depression, as well as suicide. So the impacts this is directly from their statement. The impacts will be severely felt on Black and brown children, on the low-income children, and on the learning disabled. So, unfortunately, we have a choice, but there's going to be severe negative ramifications possibly on either side. And this is how I feel, and this is how the parents that contacted me feel. With such low numbers we have, the parents, in this community, the majority of them feel that the risks, the very real risks of the educational, social, and emotional health by going back remotely far outweigh the risks of having distance learning. Also, one other thing, we did send out a survey. Peter shared that the parents and guardians of 860 students responded. And one of the questions was, if the public health office believed it is safe to allow in-person instruction, 85% of the respondents felt comfortable with that. Number two, do you plan on your child returning to school no matter the restrictions, mask wearing, staying in one classroom, etc.? Only 11% said no. So that tells me that the vast majority of parents feel that the damage done by not going is greater than the potential risk of going. And that, I know 2 weeks ago, it was presented that a hybrid model was going to be introduced. Then we had a week of public forums. Well, people who thought that the hybrid model was going to be the one in choice, understandably didn't feel the need to speak during those forums. So you had a vocal minority of parents who felt that this either hybrid or full in-school model, but the majority of parents didn't speak up during that session. And the last week, I've gotten a lot of feedback, and I'm sure the rest of the committee has as well. So that's what all I had to say about that issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I speak for a minute?
Of course. Who's Diane?
Oh, sorry, it's Becky.
We're, very quickly, because we had public comment already.
Well, sorry, it's a school nurse, so I feel like it's relevant.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just think that if we go back or we don't go back, that I'm not sure that the parents or realize that when there's a child with a runny nose or a cough, that there's so many rules that go along with going back to school. And the nurses really want something to come out of the central office or from the school committee stating that if the school nurse calls, they need to be there. And then they need to, if they go home with symptoms, they need to quarantine their child for 14 days or have a COVID test. That is from the CDC and the state. So there's an awful lot of rules that I'm not sure everyone's aware of that are really pretty important. That parents are going to have to be available. I don't want people to think that we're going to go back to a normal day once school starts again, because it's not really going to be like that. I think it's important to go back. I do, but
no, I appreciate that. It was helpful to hear you say that. Donna Astion, you wanted to say something very brief.
Are we going to open comment again, Steve?
No, we're not going to open comments. Donna, very briefly, because we already had open comments.
Oh, she's a teacher. I didn't realize that.
Yes.
This is Donna Astian. I am co-president of BHEA. On behalf of the teachers, secretaries, and paraprofessionals of the regional school district, we thank you for your support during these unprecedented times. As the BHEA said before, safety of all of our students, staff, and family members is our main concern. This has not changed. The teachers of the district are aware of the immense challenges and the obligations that we have in educating the children and young people in our community. We take these responsibilities very seriously and have begun preparing for the task of remote learning. Our negotiations with Superintendent Dillon and the school committee members are collaborative and respectful. This relationship is something that we take great pride in. We all have the same goal, to educate our children in the safest way that we can during a crisis that has affected every person on earth. As members of the school committee, you have accepted the need to start the school year using a
Donna, I think we lost you.
We did.
If I,
Johnny,
I could just,
Well, no, I think I'd like to be recognized before you, Rich.
okay.
I can.
I didn't realize you had your hand up, I'm sorry.
I've been trying for a while.
I didn't realize that.
Sorry. I thought I was on
ask
mute.
you to
So,
continue to support
I
the
just wanna
staff
get that-
through the rules. By,
You're breaking up, and
could I finish?
yeah, you were breaking up, so we missed part of you.
Okay, so I will just finish by saying, we ask you to remember that our community, that we are community members too. We live here, we worship here, our children grow and learn together here. We want the same things that you all want, a safe, healthy place in which all of our children can learn, play, and grow. Thank you.
Andy, go ahead.
in that light, I definitely want to say that it shouldn't be an us-them. This is not, we're all in this together and we're having a discussion. Now, going back to Jason's comments, because I wanted to respond. I'm very wary of situations where I start hearing anecdotal descriptions of how people feel, how things might have gone, depending on how the... I've had a number of people contact me. I've had discussions in the community. They've certainly not been unanimous in any one direction or other. I've had quite a few of parents with students in the district who are honestly thinking along the same lines we heard earlier of either homeschooling or being comfortable in 100% remote. Circumstances differ across households in our district. However, I do think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, we have the original plan I remember from 2 weeks ago had 4 cohorts, or 4, basically 4 approaches. One of those was 100% remote learning for the year. That cohort exists, correct?
It will.
That is an option.
The 100% remote learning is an option. And then the 3 other cohorts are the high needs cohort that gets more face-to-face time in what Kate was describing tonight, right? Like in the hybrid model, the group that gets almost entirely face-to-face time. And then the 2 other cohorts are the remainder of the kids split in 2.
All right. So, there's a range of options here. I'll admit I didn't like what I saw from the state. I didn't like the language of expectation. That offended me, frankly. When it's convenient, the state likes to say the districts should have autonomy and make their own decisions, and then when push comes to shove, they're throwing words like expectation at us. So that's just my thoughts. It's difficult, but I do think that we shouldn't be pitting teachers against parents or parents against the school committee, or this is all something that we just need to work through, and also pay attention to what's going on, because it's not over.
Thank you, Andy. Anyone else on the school committee?
Can I raise a point, since it's come up that teachers are involved? I've been getting some messages during this meeting from some teachers in the district. One who states that there are teachers on the staff, and there are staff members that come from Pittsfield, and Pittsfield has just been relegated to green. So that's one element. This is about the technology involved with the learning and the learning platform called Canvas. And Andy, you're on the technology committee. I don't understand anything about it, but I'm just going to summarize what the two messages that I've gotten say, that they don't have access to an actual account with the new Canvas learning platform. They're using a free trial, but we don't have access to anything that we can roll over once we actually get an account. And some of these teachers have lost everything that they've created through the trial. And another one says, we don't want to be thrown under the bus if we don't have everything up and running at the outset of the year. And so I guess the question is, I don't know the technology, but it seems that some of the faculty are having difficulty with this account thing on Canvas. And looking at a hybrid or a total remote, I think we're going to have to deal with this. So, Peter, I don't know anything about it, but I'm just bringing it up. So it's another thing that maybe you can look into, is what's the problem that some of these teachers are having about having a actual account. Okay?
Yeah, but it's a known issue. We've got 11 days at the start of school where we're going to train people in Canvas. We hope their accounts are live sooner than that. It took a while for the high school to roll over their schedule, and we're having some issues on the other side with Canvas. The whole country is moving to this at the same time, right? And we started work on this on the remote learning piece in May and June, and districts 100 times bigger than us are facing the same challenges we're facing. There's so many providers, there's so many things to move. It takes a while for accounts to get going. And I feel bad that some people are having a frustrating experience, and other people have built out whole sites and are in quite good shape. So let's see where we are on September 4th. Let's see where we are on September 11th, because those are the benchmarks that we set internally. And we want it to be up and running, and we also want to be patient and realistic.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I make just a procedural suggestion?
Yes, you may.
And I'm not open it back up if anybody wants to make any motions or do anything tonight, but my thought is that there's still, even though we've learned a lot, we know a lot more this week than we certainly did last week. I think there's still a lot of issues, and the teachers have been very engaged and thoughtful, and I appreciate that. And their rights need to be heard, not just in this forum, but through the negotiation process. So my suggestion would be that we I know we're planning on meeting next Thursday, but that agenda include both an executive session and a vote on the reopening plan.
I think that makes perfectly good sense. So we will do that.
Is that a motion, Rich, or do you?
No, that's up to
the chair sets the agenda. It was a suggestion.
Agenda, so,
fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are we going to re-vote on the reopening plan yet again?
When we get new information, there's no reason we can't.
I know. That's kind of my point.
Yeah.
It's a very, very fluid situation.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll start a 5:30 executive session next week with a different Zoom link. Then we'll go, once the executive session is over, we'll go to an open meeting. And I'm not guaranteeing we're going to take another vote, but we may do that. And this may give parents some hope that they'll have a better idea of what we're going to do starting September 14th. And I would hope that the negotiations go quickly and go well, because I agree with Donna. We've always worked well together, and we should continue to work well together. I'm not planning to negotiate in public, but I don't see why the administration, school committee, and the teachers and paraprofessionals can't come to a conclusion rather quickly for the best needs of the students and staff and community.
No, and I think it's highly likely, Steve, that that will reach conclusions on some big time-sensitive issues, and some of the nuanced stuff we may be talking about for weeks.
Yeah, I think you're right. Anyone else from the school committee?
One more point I'd like to bring up is that came up in an email to me was how are we going to deal with, is there a plan for substitutes? And if, for example, 20% of the staff is out, how are we going to deal with substitutes? That's one point. And the second one is, since if we choose to go to an all remote to begin with, teachers would be, there are some teachers that would be out at their home. They could be sick for whatever reason. They could not be there. So have we looked at getting substitutes trained on the Canvas platform? And I think it's just another thing that has to be looked at, along with, I'm sure there's going to be other things we haven't even thought of yet. But that just was brought to my attention that maybe the substitutes, some of them need to be trained on Canvas also.
Thanks, Bill. It's a good point. It's on the list already. The more likely scenario would be that all the paraprofessionals are going to be trained on Canvas and they're in-house and they stay with us. So in the event of a teacher being sick at home, we'd likely lean on a paraprofessional to do that. And they have an existing relationship with the students and with the teacher, so that sets us up well. I think on the broader thing, if we do go to a hybrid model, at some point we will have issues with substitutes. Many substitutes are of your generation, and they're reluctant to come into school. So we're going to have some struggles there this year.
Okay. Anyone else?
I just want to make one comment, and I'm not looking to spark a discussion of any kind, but just to echo conversations I've had with other school committee members and Peter, is there's no decision on sports that's not made by the school committee. That'll be made by the administration, and whenever it's made, you'll hear about it.
You are aware that they came out with guidelines today about that.
About opening sports, I know, but that's
well, they put them into different categories: level 1, 2, and 3. And one of your favorites, Rich, is number 3.
I know.
And the rules look like you're going to have a flag instead of blocking and tackling.
I think you're right about that. I know you're right about that.
There's also an assumption. So I might make a recommendation or ask you to vote on something at a future meeting. But there's also an assumption that, and it's very confusing in Massachusetts. I barely understand it 11 years in. The MIAA has a lot of autonomy, but at the end of the day, DESE is going to weigh in on the guidance they got today and make a recommendation. But we could, if DESE makes a ruling on it, we obviously follow their ruling. If they go back to their local control, you decide what you want to do, then we'll present you with the range of possibilities and the pros and cons, and you can make an informed decision.
Anyone else? We will meet next Thursday at 5:30 for executive session, followed by the school committee meeting in a similar format to this one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Stand adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.